Welcome, everyone, once again to Writers and Fighters, the podcast where I interview people involved with writing and people involved with fighting. Coming up today, I have an interview with Anja Stridsman. She's calling in from Australia. She's a boxer with some great insight into the fight game. Really cool personality, easy conversation, talk about injury, triumphs in the ring, her artistic endeavors, and a number of other things. So stay tuned for that interview portion coming up. I'm your host, AJ Ortega, and maybe you know and maybe you don't, but I'm a writer myself. You know, thinking about the title of this podcast, Writers and Fighters. This is not just the people I'm interviewing that are somehow involved with writing or somehow involved with fighting. But I'm a writer. On the other end, it's been many years since I did any fighting for sport or competition. Last time I was in a boxing gym, and the garage doesn't count, was at least 2 years ago. But I'm currently and actively a writer. I went to school for it. It's a hard and weird but worthwhile endeavor. And I wanted to, I was thinking about a story about, well, what does it mean to be a writer or say that you're a writer? I was thinking about it because last week I got a couple of poems accepted for publication, 2 poems in 2 different journals. And it was cool. It was great. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel that, the work I put in is going somewhere. And I like the poems, even if they're not representative of me now as a writer or a person, because they're things I revisited from years and years ago. So that's kind of odd, but I am glad that they're out there, because there's times where it's hard to say, I'm a writer, because I always feel like I run the risk of sounding like, yeah, I write, man. I have all this stuff to say, man. And that's a weird impulse for me to have. But this is also an odd profession to seek out, an odd art form to turn into some sort of professional identity or something. And I feel like I'm in my infancy as a writer still. And I went to school forever for it. Long ago now, it feels like. But I think I'm a novice still. I feel like I'm an amateur still. And that's not a bad thing, to call back to the John Fry episode of this podcast where he told me that the root word of the word amateur, which we also use in the fight game, right? The word amateur comes from the same root of the word love, of word for love. I guess that's Latin, which is why in Spanish we get amor and stuff like that, right? Or amorous. And so I feel like I'm quite young at the writing thing still. And so these publications that came up recently, which were cool and made me feel good, they made me think about the first time I felt that energy and how good it feels to succeed in whatever little way at that I'm a writer kind of thing. I remember I was asked to write this book review for a newspaper once for a book that was like an anthology that had several different poems and short stories and pieces of journalism or nonfiction, all compiled into a book. And this is like 2009, over a decade ago. And this is like my first real gig in that money was going to be involved. And I'm talking like $25 or something. And so I get this book and I write this book review up and I send it over to the editor that asked for it. And, well, he rejects it. And that felt odd because I was asked to do it. Again, it was one degree away and a couple connections. And this guy can write that for you. And so I was asked to do this and then got rejected. And so I was weirdly mad. And again, young and to a certain extent immature. But I got some advice and somebody said, no, that's good. Just send it somewhere else. And it landed in a little journal, a better place for it anyway. And so I wrote this book review, and lots of writers that I admire were included in it. It comes out, little book review comes out in this little journal. And I go to this book release and signing thing for this anthology. And there's a bunch of writers there, and they're all shaking hands and doing their thing. And I'm young and weird and useless around these people that I kind of know, like on the periphery. And I'm still weird in those situations at times. And right when I'm feeling really weird, I'm just like, okay, like maybe I got to bail, or I don't know. This professor and writer who I knew from years before, we say hi and catch up. And I tell him I wrote this little review that came out in this journal, and he smiles real big and pats me on the back and says, "You're doing it." And he's real happy for me. And this is like over a decade ago, and I still remember that moment, those 3 words, "You're doing it." I wrote a little easy, book review over a book that he had, was featured in and stuff. And him telling me, like, "You're doing it." Like, I felt like, hey, am I a writer? Like, am I close? And I think about that moment, sometimes when I get rejections, but always when I get those acceptances. I've lost count of the rejections. I still collect them, but I don't count them anymore. But that "you're doing it" kind of moment, I was thinking about that recently because I got a few new things out. ajortega.net if you're curious what it was and where it was and all that stuff. And I don't mean to plug my own stuff because that's weird. You're already listening to my thing. But part of this, me sharing this story and saying, hey, I'm doing writing stuff. I say so because I want folks listening to know where I'm coming from and like why I run the show the way I do and cover topics that I'm curious about, while still being knowledgeable enough to speak on the subject matter from at least a minor position of authority or credibility is a better word. Speaking of credibility, my guest today, she has credibility for sure. She has some cred. Anja Stridsman is a Swedish Australian boxer who won a gold medal in the women's 60 kilo weight class at the 2018 Commonwealth Games. And just really, really quickly, tangentially, so like we have like the Olympics, right? A bunch of different sports represented from several different countries. But there's also like the Asia Games, which are just like Asian countries, as you would imagine. Then there's the Commonwealth Games, which are the ones I'm referencing now with Anja Stridsman. And so those are, it's composed of countries which used to be under British rule, several, dozens of sports, over 40 countries, I guess, over maybe over 50, at least that are included in the Commonwealth. I'm not entirely sure how many compete, but tons. And so that's the level that Anja Stridsman's competing at. And we talked about her start in boxing. We talked about a pretty intense injury and overcoming that and kind of working through it and how that led into her gold medal win at the 2018 Commonwealth Games representing Australia. And then we wrap up a little bit hearing about her art, which is really cool, and her recent skateboarding practice, which, again, I just admire, picking up new things. And she's very forthcoming about having different kind of angles in the way she expresses herself or exercises and gets fit and fills whatever needs she has creatively or physically. Really cool conversation. She has a great personality, great attitude, this badass chick kind of style, and gave us a great interview to listen to. So I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys do too. All right, and I am here with Anja Stridsman. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
I guess I'm mainly a boxer. I was born in Sweden, but I moved to Australia when I was 19. I actually moved to Australia to study graphic design. I didn't start boxing until I was 23, so in 2010. And then from then on, I kind of set my goals really high. And since 2015, I've represented Australia. So since then I've been traveling a lot around the world, boxing. And I guess other than boxing, I just do a lot of other athletic activities. I'm a very active person, so I just love doing things with my body and seeing how far I can push it and what I can get it to do.
Yeah, that's part of I saw your Instagram profile was, I love training videos and people lifting and just I like sitting on my couch looking at other people being more active than me. And so your account is great for that, So we're going to hear about all these other things that you're into as well. And so the start in boxing, you're from Sweden, 19, you moved to Australia for like university studies, college, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so there was no boxing before then?
Not really. I'd done like one of those, a few of those boxercise classes, but like in my life, maybe about 5 of them.
Sure.
I'd always play
like cardio boxing stuff, right? Like
yeah, I just tried it, in school and then maybe at the gym a few times, and I thought that was fun, but I wasn't even really into boxing. I remember seeing the heavyweight fights and I kind of thought that they were just hugging, and I was also I'm not a very violent person, so if I got in a fight with someone, I would have never hit them. I would have potentially verbally abused them, but I would have. So it wasn't really something that was like even on my radar.
Okay, yeah, so that was going to be one of my questions. I was like, were you even like plugged into the boxing world and watching like fights and like keeping up with that? And you're like, well, maybe one day. And then it just kind of presented its opportunity, but you weren't into it then.
No, I wasn't. And it was kind of strange because I was living in Australia and I played a lot of sports growing up. So mainly soccer and then basketball. And I wrestled when I was a kid though. So maybe the wrestling kind of did open me up to it in some ways, because it's obviously also a martial art of sorts.
Sure.
And but when I was working as a graphic designer, I used to walk past a boxing gym, and I think that's when maybe you hear the sounds from it or something. And I think that there was a part of me that was fascinated by it in some way because of the empowerment that it gives you. And I guess I knew the discipline that it would take to become good at it. Mm-hmm. And so I was walking past this boxing gym a lot, and I was playing soccer here in Australia at the time, but like trainings kept raining out because the season's during the winter. And I've always needed like physical activity because otherwise my mind just races, and I feel like I get really like restless in my soul is what I like to say. And one day I just was like, you know what, I'm going to check out this boxing gym. So I went on their website and they had an 8-day trial for $25. And I was like, I'm just going to sign up for this trial. And so I went into the gym, like didn't really know what to expect, but it was like the first punch I threw on it was a bag class. They had maybe 30 bags in there full of people. And I just knew I wanted to see how good I could get. And I think it was that I guess I felt it was all in my hands, and I quite like individual endeavors of sorts because, it's just about how hard you work, how much you're willing to put into it, and, just to keep kind of pushing yourself to achieve your goals. And I've always been, ever since I was a kid, I was like, I can do anything. I never let anything stop me. It was just like, if I wanted to do something, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I never even considered it not being possible.
Yeah, it's one of those things with, I think, martial arts and training in any kind of style, that those kinds of, gyms and dojos and things like this, that they do create that confidence stuff and self-worth stuff, and you get setting goals and seeing results and discipline, like you said, right, that it has to come from within. People can kind of guide you, but it does have to come from within.
I feel like you can sense that. This is the moment that you walk into one of those gyms, you can sense that in the atmosphere, and you see people, just like blowing hard, sweating all over the shop. If they're sparring, there might be blood, but you see the determination in their eyes, and you can just feel it in the air almost when you walk into those places, and it makes you, want to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah. Walking into a gym, again, like a boxing gym, right? Last one I was in, it was in Austin, Texas, a few years ago. yeah, I go in there, and there was a couple guys that were early in their pro career, so they get a little bit more attention and stuff, but everybody's there grinding and sweating. In the winter, you can see your breath because they leave the garage doors open and all that stuff. But that discipline is almost like this cliched thing we talk about when we say martial arts and fighting and working out and discipline. But it's 100% true. And part of what you bring up is that individual nature of it is that, like, yeah, you can't go sit on the bench when you get popped in the face and somebody else goes in to fight for you. No, that's subbing out like in basketball or football or whatever. So I dig that. When did you start? Go ahead.
And I always think about that when you're fighting someone, like that, like, I'm on my journey and I face all my obstacles and all my demons when I step into that ring. But I think one of the scary things, like, about going into the ring against someone else is, like, you don't know what they've been fighting inside their head to get to where they are at. So it's just always, like, really unknown. Like, we all step in there kind of like with our previous battles and then, go to face each other.
No, that's a really good one. That first time you're in front of somebody where they don't know you, they're not from your gym, they don't care about you, and that person's going to be the one that's hitting me now. There's a different level that first time. When did you go from just training to like an organized competition at some point?
Well, I knew pretty early on, sometimes I've done interviews and they say that I got into it for fitness, but I didn't really. I just went into it because I wanted something else to do when soccer kept raining out. And I've always been very serious about everything. And it only took me like a month or two, because I did the trial, and then my boss at the time was like, "You're not going to become one of those people where everything's about your boxing, are you?" And I was like, no, I'm like, I'm not going to be that person. And then like maybe a month later I signed up, and it took me, because I'd never been in that environment. So I was like, well, how do I even start? Like, how do I get into this? How do I start boxing? And so I went up to this guy, like this huge heavyweight kickboxing guy, during one of the classes. And I was like, so what do I do? Like, if I want to do this? And he was like, listen, his name's Peter Graham. So people probably know him. He's like multiple times world champion in K1, and he's done boxing as well. And he's a great guy. And I had no idea who he was. He was like, yeah, like, I'm a multiple world champion, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, I don't know who you are, dude. But when he was like, if you want to do this, like, if you want to become a fighter, and I was like, oh, fighter, that sounds so funny. And he was like, then you, like, I'm going to dedicate myself to you, and I'm going to give you my time. And then, like, so I expect you to, like, walk away from here and have a think about it, because, this is what I expect from you. So I walked away, and I was like, I knew that I wanted to do it. So the next day I went back to him, and I was like, let's do this. Like, let's train. So I started training with him once a week, and then pretty soon after that, twice a week. And then I did all the sorts of classes. And then I found out that women could go to the Olympics. So I said to him, listen, I want to go to the Olympics. But which was kind of funny, because I kind of wanted to do kickboxing, but obviously the Olympics was boxing. So I started training boxing with him, and I was training a lot with him, but I think it took me maybe 6 months. It took ages before he allowed me to even spar, because I think he didn't want me to embarrass him. And the first time I did spar, he wasn't even there, and I sparred against the guy that owned the gym, and I punched him in the balls like 3 times. So jab to the body, and I'd only done it on the bags before. I had no notion of like what sparring was. I just went in there and like went crazy. And I think I had my first fight probably, which was a kickboxing fight. And that was about a little over a year after I started training with him. I had my first kickboxing fight, and it was 1.5 minute rounds, 3 of them. And oh my God, it was the longest 1.5 minutes of my life.
Oh yeah. And because, again, in boxing, kickboxing, martial arts stuff, the breathing is so important, right? When people are like, what's that sound when the boxers punch? And I was like, well, that's making sure the air goes out and in and all this kind of stuff. I had the worst habit of, when it becomes competition, I'm holding my breath almost, right? When you're throwing punches and holding your breath, tightening up your chest, and those couple minutes become super long. What else do you remember about early competition that way? Again, eye-opening, like 1.5 minutes is an hour now. When did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like I remember doing my first Tabata, which is one like as in a session, when you just go in the bag and you have to work as hard as you can for 20 seconds and then you rest for 10 and you do it 8 times. Like 20 seconds has never felt so long. And paradoxically, 10 seconds has never felt so short, like, like you're in this yeah, like a lot of that, I feel like your perception of time just completely changed. And then also, I think you let yourself go into something primal. Especially, I mean, it depends on who you are. People usually have problems with either getting hit or with hitting someone else, or they don't have a problem with either. Like I never had a problem with either of them. I mean, you react to getting punched in the face, and you're like, you kind of shy back and stuff, but and your eyes water, especially when you punch in the nose.
Sure.
But I just, I feel like I just let go of everything and just went forward. Didn't care if I got hit. I didn't even notice probably. I got put in to spar this girl, probably my second sparring session, and she was about to fight, and they put me in there. And I think they put me in there because they were like, we're going to put this girl in her place. Like, you can't be going around like a lunatic the way that she is in sparring. I didn't get it. That didn't teach me anything. I kept going the way I did. But I think, it was a big buildup. Like, it's so different in the beginning when you fight to later on, because there's such a buildup to your fights, the first few, because they're not as often, you have to wait for a while until you can get your next fight. And sometimes people pull out, and you actually have your little training camps, like even as an amateur. So the first few fights, like there was so much more excitement about those, where, it was a massive, like a big thing. And then at some point, you just started fighting a lot more often, and maybe you started going to tournaments, and then that kind of changed, and it just became one of those things that I would do every weekend.
There you go. Awesome. And so once you're competing that often, right, for most of us, part of the deal, even going to local regional tournaments and stuff like that, losing and defeat are part of the game, right? Like, again, that individual nature of the fight game. So you get to own that win really, almost totally. But the loss also is like entirely on your shoulders, right? What about that?
I think that I've always sort of, I've never liked losing. I've always been really hard on myself. And I think that losing was probably easier for me in the beginning. Like, I'd be really disappointed, but I think that then I would just like pick myself back up, and I'd go training, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, well, next one I'm going to win. I'm going to work harder and stuff. And I think as I went on in my career, because I didn't have any expectations on myself in the beginning. I think, it wasn't like you should be better than this. It was like, I wish I were better than this, rather, like, I'm going to get better than this. But then when you get to a point where you're good, you're competing against some of the best, then you have a bad fight, and then you go, I should be better than this. And I felt something that I noticed then was that, or I noticed it only recently, really, or that it was a problem, was that then I went like, you should be better than this. This isn't good enough. Like, you're shit, and then I'd get this like negative narrative in my head where I would really talk down on myself, and I would kind of hold on to a bad sparring session, a bad training session, a bad loss for longer, but not in a constructive way. It would rather just make me feel bad about myself. And that's something that I guess I've tried to work on now, because I think by all means, like, be as disappointed as you want about losing. Like, you're supposed to be. If you don't care at all, then go do something else, or, do it.
There has to be something at stake. Yeah.
100%. But then, like, you can't be thinking that you're a bad person because you're losing a fight, because you're no different, or like you're allowed to make mistakes. Just, find a way to take what you need from that loss, and then, but don't have it as a reflection upon yourself as a person. And that's something that I'm kind of like really trying to work on now, because I think when you have it as a reflection of your person, it's harder to move forward in a constructive and a productive way.
Yeah, I think that hypercritical version of ourselves, right, can come out in those moments of like defeat or like you're not on your best, right? And you know, in the fight game, it's just like, man, it was just the wrong day. That person had my number, but it had to be that day and this time and me at this level. And you have to again take that. It's information for you, right? It's information you got to take in, evaluate, do something with. Yeah, otherwise it just becomes that, you know, using yourself as a punching bag thing,
Yeah.
which I'm totally guilty of in a lot of avenues of my life where I'm just like the writing thing, nothing I write is good. It's all shitty. I'm never going to do it. And it's like, well, that's not true either, AJ. Come on. And so I have to snap out of it.
And I think that like what I've realized also is that you just got to put things out there, even if it is bad. Then like just don't be so scared of the criticism and the defeat and all of those things. Just like take it on the chin and learn from it, like and keep putting yourself out there, because I think you require a bit of confidence to get anywhere, you know, and you have to dare to fail, and you have to be kind of like you have to dare to be bad at things sometimes, you know, because everyone goes through a learning curve. Like no matter what they do, it's like people come up to me when it comes to boxing, they're like, I'm nowhere near as good as you are. I was like, yeah, but like how long have you been doing it for? And it doesn't even matter, you know, like you are where you are in your journey of it, like as I am. But that's what I kind of got to learn to say to myself. And I think if I lose a fight and I fought well, then I'm not as upset with myself. But then again, I've got such high standards on myself that a lot of the time I will still not be happy with my performance. But if I lose a fight and I know that, you know, I did my absolute best and it was a close fight, and you know, then it's easier for me to accept and walk away from that. But at the Olympic trials last year, I fought quite badly because I think I was in a bad place. I was just really run down, and I felt like I walked in there and I just walked forward and didn't think so much because I think I was just stressed, and I was just focused too much on being scared of getting tired, being scared of losing my Olympic shot. And then I walked in there and they told us the scores after the rounds. So I knew that I'd lost the first round, and then I just panicked and went forward, which isn't how I normally box. But, you know, you learn something from that. But after that fight, you know, like I hated myself. I thought that I was like the worst person in the world. But I guess if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be where I am now, where I actually am really trying to change that.
I think that's because again, the skills you get like in boxing, you're do enough time in the gym, you're going to get those. That switch with the mindset thing in terms of taking those defeats and how do you readjust? Don't beat yourself up. That's a huge that's a huge skill that you're polishing there, and I think that's awesome. I'm happy for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I am too. Like, it's interesting. I have conversations with myself in my head sometimes when I hear that little voice that's like, oh, that's not good enough, you're shit. And I'll be like, shut up, Anja. You're fucking awesome. Like, you're here. Like, you don't have to be a pro skateboarder yet.
Oh, we're going to get to the skateboarding thing.
It's good enough.
No, we're going to get to the skateboarding thing, especially because you said something that I wrote down because it was brilliant. Dare to be bad at something, right? Like you have to dare to be shitty at something that's new and novel to you. And we're going to get to the skateboarding thing, but I want to kind of talk a little bit. So we talked a little bit about losing and defeat and the hard parts of the fight game. You went through a particularly hard part of doing physical activity in getting injured before the Commonwealth Games in 2018. So how did that injury happen? And how was the road to recovery and stuff like that?
So that happened in September 2017. I just won the New South Wales State Championships, and I boxed really well there, which qualified me for the Commonwealth Games trials that were supposed to be in November. So we went over for an international competition in Poland, and I was really excited because I just wanted to kind of like prove myself, and I felt like everything was coming together. But then in the first round against Scotland, I got kind of stuck on her leg somehow, or I don't know if she stepped on my foot, and so I twisted out to the side, and it was like my leg was stuck and my knee twisted, and I could kind of hear it was like a rag wrung out, and it went.
Oh no.
And I felt but I didn't really realize what it was because I'd never had any issues with my knees. And then I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. And I stood up and I was like, well, that hurts a bit, but I don't know. I'm just going to try to keep going. So I stood back up and I kind of, I think I stepped back from something and then I tried to step in with a punch and then my knee just gave way on me. And it was so uncomfortable. And the doctor came over and looked at it and she just like waved the fight off. So, and I was like walking out of the ring and I could walk normally then, but whenever I turned, my knee was really unstable and I was crying because, I was just thinking about that competition. I didn't realize it was that serious and no one thought it was anything. But then when I got back to Australia, I found out that my ACL was just completely torn. And the first thing was, everyone was just like, yeah, Anja's screwed. Like she's out. Like she can't go to the Com Games, and even my coach was like, yeah, Anja's got like, oh shit, that's no good. And I don't know. I don't think I even realized, I'd never had an injury to that extent before. But then my coach is a little bit crazy and so am I. And he kind of he's like, football players, they play with the torn ACL all the time. Like, he's like, maybe we could just fight without your ACL. Because it was only 2 months now until the qualifiers. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. And I found out later on that football players don't play with a torn ACL. Like, maybe they finish the game and they play badly.
Right, and it just shreds it up. So I don't, yeah.
But, I didn't know that. So I was just like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So we went to a surgeon and spoke to him. And he was like, to anyone else, I'd be like, yeah, you can't do it. But you seem like you're going to do anything, everything that you have to do. So she's like, go for it. So I kind of just started. I found this baseline where it was like, okay, well, these are the things I can do when my knee's at its worst. Because obviously initially I got back and then it was really bad. It was really unstable. It would just cave in on me all the time. So, and I could go straight in and out, but as soon as I put any sort of weight towards the side or tried to twist, then my knee just wouldn't support me. So I had these, like, I would do like one-legged squats and I would like sit there and tense my leg and like holding my toes in different ways. And then, but anytime I kind of like started to pick it back up, it would cave in on me. But eventually it would get stronger. But then whenever like I did partner work and it would still cave in on me on occasion. And then we would said that if I could fight to like 65-70%, then we'd do it. But otherwise we'd pull out of nationals. And in the meantime, like I would hear everyone just kind of like, I'd see things on Facebook or whatever, like that I was out, like, people moved to my division because obviously it'd be easier to go in that one because I wasn't able to fight, they thought. I just like when it was getting closer to the trials, I think it was like a week and a half out, we were gonna test it. So after a training session, we were doing just shoulder and stomach touch, but we kind of going full on. We're just not hitting each other to the head. And I were doing minute rounds or something. And then with two of the boys from the gym. And then on one of the last ones, because my coach kept pushing me, like, step in, like step in hard, like you're afraid of the knee. I was like, yeah, well, I am afraid because it feels like shit when it goes on me. But then in the last round, I think I stepped in really hard and it just caved in on me and it just felt worse than it had before. And I was like, oh, I don't, I was crying and I could hardly walk. And I was like, I don't know if this is gonna, like, I don't know if it's going to be okay now. And it was only a week and a half out from competition. And my coach was like kind of upset about it. And the next day I went and I did the things that I would normally do when it had caved in and I had to take it easy. Like I'd walk up hills and, do these things. But even those things felt worse than they had. And I was laying there and I was crying in my bed, like, cause I was just like, I blamed my coach a little bit for pushing me, but I also knew that he had to push me. But I knew that if it went on me again, like soon after this, then like didn't think I would make it back. But I wasn't ready to give up then yet. It was like there were so many moments in that journey where I could have given up and probably would have been okay. No one would have thought any less of me if I had, but I just couldn't do it until I knew that there was like no chance. So I think I went into like we were supposed to spar on the Tuesday, so this was like a week out. So I went in and I taped my knee up, like it was just, I couldn't move it. And I just did the sparring session. It was the worst one I've ever done. I basically didn't move. I just stood still and fought on the inside the whole time. And then, but I did it, and the knee was all right. And then we did these like 1 minute rounds again in the ring, which were pretty intense. And that's when, and I could feel this like tingly feeling in my knee. And I was like, oh, it might go. So I was like, I'm done now. Like I tested it for today. So I got out of the ring, and then my coach he's like, where do you think you're going? And I was like, I'm done. Like I'm good. And he's like, it's up to you if you want to fight. And then I was just like, all this frustration. I was like, I just picked up a glove and I threw it at him. And he was like, don't throw a glove at me. And I was like, well, stop being a bitch. Yeah. And I ran out and I sat and I cried because I was like, I was so scared, like of not making it and of my knee not being okay. And I was so scared of, because I knew that a part of me would blame him if my knee wasn't okay. Right. But I couldn't say that to him. So I was like, don't you understand? I was thinking it was like, don't you understand how scared I am? Can't you see it? But he didn't, he just did what he thought he had to do to get me through it as a coach. But I was sitting out there crying. I got someone else to get my stuff. And then we didn't speak for like 2 days. And eventually I was like, oh, we're about 2 days later, I was like, we're like 5 days out from comp or so. And I was like, I need to, or 6 days maybe. I was like, I need to spar. We need to see if I can do this. So I organized sparring with some girls. And I sort of met up with him, and we had a bit of a talk. And I said, listen, I've organized sparring with these girls there. So he's like, okay, well, let's do it. We'll go and we'll see if we can do the sparring session, then we'll do it. So that was like make or break. So I went there and I remember this moment really clearly because I was shadow boxing and I could feel that tingly feeling in my knee. And to me, I associated that with it caving in. And I'd spoken to a guy that had shoulder reconstruction before. And I said, and he'd asked me how I was. I was like, yeah, I'm all right. I was like, I don't know, but like, my knee is like, I was like, it just feels wrong, And he's like, well, that's because it is wrong. And he's like, that's just the way it is now. And then I thought, okay. I was like, yeah, okay, well, it is wrong now. I was like, but maybe that feeling that I have doesn't have to mean that it's going to go on me. Maybe it's just, it feels different now. And I just have to work with that. So I kept warming up, and then I got in the ring and I sparred 3 rounds, I think, and the knee didn't cave. And I had to fight a little bit differently. Obviously, I kind of adapt more in and out, less, not so much angles, and sort of be smart about it. But it went well. And my coach was like, yeah, that's good. Like, I'm happy. He's like, do you want to do any more? I was like, oh, he's like, you don't have to. I was like, oh, we'll do some more. So I did 2 more rounds. And in the last minute of the last round, my knee caved in on me. And I was like, damn. But then I was like, I just got back up. And I kept boxing and I finished it, and it wasn't too bad. And he was like, that's what you're going to have to do if your knee caves in. He's like, at nationals. And I was like, yeah, I know. And he's like, I'm not going to ask you how your knee is once you start fighting there. But after that session, we're like, yeah, we're doing it. And then, went to nationals, and that was kind of undramatic. Like it wasn't. I mean, I fought my 3 fights, and I guess that, then you'd made it there, and I won my 3 fights. And I think it was just after that last one where everything sort of dawned on me, and I was like crying, went out of the ring, and everyone was like, Anja, like, why are you crying? Like, you just won. I was like, oh, I'm just so happy. And, it was just because no one believed that I could do it. So it was one of those moments that, like, no one could take away from me, or I couldn't even take it away from myself, with my self-critical side. There was just, I did that, I could have given up and no one would have cared, but I didn't. And then a week after I had surgery, and then kind of was like a new journey where I had to rehab. And my position in the team wasn't even confirmed yet, kind of like it was mine, but they said that they could replace me because they didn't really want to, I guess, put their money on an injured horse.
Yeah, I could see their point too. And yeah. So was that like your first kind of any injury you've had, like intense kind of surgery, right?
Yeah.
How did the surgery go, and then the recovery? You did the cadaver tendon replacement, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I had an Achilles tendon of a cadaver put in as my ACL. And the Achilles tendon is actually thicker than your ACL is normally. So it's very stable from the start. So, but that also means that normally they would do a hamstring graft. So you'd take a piece of your own hamstring. But then if you do this, your hamstring doesn't have to heal. So you reduce a little bit of the recovery. And I only had 5 months to recover. So it was,
Time.
I knew I was on a really tight schedule, but I was lucky because I got into an accelerated rehab program at the AIS, so the Institute of Sport. So I basically lived there until the Com Games, and had a whole team behind me with physios and strength and conditioning coaches and everything. And then but I wasn't part of the team though, preparing for the Com Games. So that was hard sometimes because I felt pretty lonely, but I had another girl that was rehabbing with me, which was good. So we became really close, but it was hard not being a part of the team. And the girl that I'd beat in the finals, she was with the team preparing because she was obviously the one that would fight in case I wasn't up to scratch.
Right.
So that was, a challenge in itself. But I think that there was frustration in that, obviously, but I kept coming back to something that I learned then that I think has been valuable to me ever since, and will be valuable to me for the rest of my life, which is just control what you can control. And so for me, that was just do my rehab the best that I absolutely can, and that didn't mean that it's easier to say than do, of course there were things that frustrated me, but at the end of the day, I just had to do my part. And then the rest really was out of my control. Yeah. So, and like the rehab went really, really well. Well, obviously, because then I went on to win the Com Games.
Ooh, spoiler. Yeah. And so what did that, and so you win your division. And so what did that signify to you after, again, and hearing you and talking to you about like the tough stuff, I can see it was a lot for you. I can see it on your face. Our audience cannot, but I can. But what about that win?
I think that it was interesting, the Com Games, because like the first fight that I had against India, I was so unhappy with that fight because I fought like shit and I was so stressed. I think, that was my first fight back. I had hardly even sparred. I sparred like a few weeks beforehand, and so it was, again, one of those where I didn't really have the greatest prep, but I had the best prep I possibly could under the circumstances. But I went in there, fought, and I was so like, I was blowing and like, I just can't even remember a lot of that fight. And I went up to my coach afterwards and I cried and I was like, I'm sorry, like I fought so badly. He's like, don't worry about it, Anja. Like, he's like, yeah, you didn't fight that well, but he's like, but you won easy. Like, don't worry about it. Because I thought that maybe I got an unfair decision being Australian in Australia.
Oh, sure.
But then after that fight, I kind of went in and, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to enjoy this. I was like, I'm at the Com Games. I might never have this opportunity again. So I'm going to just like soak it in and make the most of it. So the next fight, I was like, I was dancing around. I was just having fun. I was listening to different kind of music. The first one I was listening to like hardcore and metal. And the second fight, I was like Cisco thong song. And I was just like, going around and there dancing. And then I was like, determined to enjoy it, fake it till you make it. So then I went in and then I boxed really, really well because I was so relaxed. And I think after I won that second fight and I was into the finals, then I was like, I've got this. Because I think the first one, I just wanted to win the first fight. And the second one, again, I wanted to win that fight. And then when I was in the finals, I was like, well, I'm winning this now. Like there is no one taking this away from me. So I don't think I've ever felt as confident going into a fight as I have that Commonwealth Games final. Because I went into the ring and as I was boxing, like I knew that I was winning that fight. And it's not that often that I'm that confident that I'm winning a fight. But I knew in that fight, and it was like the timing was good. My feet was good. It was like everything. Obviously, I still wasn't 100% because it was only 5 months after the reconstruction. It was a lot of in and out, but I nailed that in and out. Like my jab was on fire, and that's my favorite punch.
That's the most important punch in boxing. Most important punch in boxing.
Yeah, it is. But people don't realize a lot of the time. But and then winning that fight, it was like, like I think it will forever be one of the biggest moments in my life, just because of the journey that I had to take to get there, but also because I kind of prove to myself the type of person and the type of athlete that I am, because I think, we all want to believe that we are the person that would get through it. It's like, we want to believe that we're the person that would take a bullet for our loved one, just like jump in front of them. But the truth is that we don't know until we're in that situation whether we are that person. And throughout this experience, I got to know that I am, I don't know if I'll jump in front of someone for a bullet, but I know that in that situation, I really am an athlete, and I am like a badass bitch, cause I've kept going when so many people would have given up, and it would have been okay. If I had given up, I wouldn't have blamed someone if they gave up.
No, I like that overcoming adversity thing, right? But again, at pretty big levels, right? And being able to, again, not catastrophize and bring yourself down, but hey, every once in a while I can pat myself on the fucking back because I kicked ass that time.
Exactly. And I feel like, I can't take anything away from myself in that. I can pat myself on the back because I'm so proud of everything that I did and learned throughout that experience. And I'm so grateful to have had that.
I love it. Yeah, it's what a great way to build who you are as a person and your character and stuff, that journey. What about physical journey, right? You have to travel and stuff for boxing. And even, your move from Sweden to Australia, that's you're in a new place, a new culture and so on. Where have you traveled and seen stuff that's interesting, or been man, boxing took me here and that was cool, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time when we go, which is unfortunate, we just end up seeing kind of the hotel and, the competition venue. But we're pretty good in the Australian team because we're all really close. So we do try to get out and see things when we can. And we've been lucky because we're from Australia. We often go on training camps, and we'll be away for extended trips, which means we get a little bit more time and maybe outside of competition in places, because we have to get there a little bit early in order to adapt to the time zones. I think that one of the we went to ringside in America, but that was before I was on the national team. That was really cool because it was such a massive competition, because they had 6 rings going, and I'd actually broken my nose just before that. And then I had to fight 4 times and won. And so that was amazing. But I mean, obviously that was America, so it's not the wildest place per se, but I think
that's one word, but yeah.
But when I went to my first world championship, we went to Kazakhstan, and that was really interesting because Kazakhstan is just not a place where I would have, probably gone otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and it was such a weird place, because Astana, their capital, is, I think, the only capital in the world. I don't know, maybe not now, but that's built in the 20th century. And it is like a sci-fi futuristic space town or something. It's literally, I feel like it just dropped on the steppes of Kazakhstan. And it's just like a city plopped in there, and it feels quite man-made. And a lot of the houses or buildings look like these alien spaceships, and they have these weird colored windows in different colors. That it was that was an interesting place, and it was so much fun as well, probably because it was my first world championship, which made it really special. And they made a really good world championship. They took these videos of us shadow boxing when we got there, and then when we were fighting, they had this big screens, and your picture came up, and you were there shadow boxing.
Oh, really cool production and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you felt like a superstar.
Hell yeah.
They made their own song for it, and everything. And that was so much fun. And then we've been to Spain a few times, which has been awesome. Really love Spain. And we've been there for training camps and a really good competition there as well, which usually has some really high quality opponents. And then because we've been there for training camps, we've had the opportunity to sort of spend some time in Spain. And I love it when we get to spend time in places, because I always like to try to learn the language, as much as I can, however long we're there.
That's awesome.
So,
what languages do you speak?
I speak Swedish and English, obviously fluent, and then I speak Italian quite well, because I lived in Italy for 8 months before coming to Australia. And then, I can speak a little bit of French and a bit of Spanish now, a little bit of Japanese. I know how to say things in a lot of languages,
Sure.
but then, when they speak back at me, I'm like,
You're like, I didn't get to that part of the dictionary yet. I don't know what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. I like to, I really want to learn Russian, and I can speak a little bit of Russian, but I can mainly speak at people. And I think my pronunciation is pretty good. So they're like, oh yeah, you can speak Russian. And then they start speaking to me, and I'm like, I don't speak good Russian. I say in Russian, and it's just like, then I'm lost. I would love to have like a little baby conversation. But when I was in Spain, it was funny because we went to Barcelona after a competition, and went to this party with these like graffiti artists and rappers or something who, like a friend of mine who's from Barcelona, we go and spray paint graffiti together sometimes. He introduced me to them, and they only spoke Spanish basically. So I was there, and I was like, I can understand and sort of speak because of Italian, but it's still different. And one of the guys can speak a little bit English. He's like, you can speak baby Spanish. I can speak baby English. It's okay. It was such a fun night. They were having like rap battles in Spanish, and then they told me we were going to paint a train, which didn't happen, but we just had this massive night, like so random. And we kind of got by on our baby Spanish and baby English together.
No, that's cool. Then you get again, it's like, even with like a language barrier and just, but like a good vibe and good people and universal sign language and pointing at shit and nodding or looking confused, and that universal language that we have across cultures that's fun. I think that's one of the coolest parts of traveling,
That's why I love to like try to learn a little bit of like the different languages when I do go. And actually, when we were in Spain, there were some guys that I met in the sauna at the gym where we were training, and they came and watched me fight and everything, So
that's so cool.
I feel like, it makes you put yourself out there that way, and that's how you're going to meet people and make connections. Like, because I can speak Italian, like during the first World Championships, I got to know the coaches of the Italian team. And so me and my friend actually organized with him in 2016 at the end of the year. We went to Italy, and we trained around Italy and had like competitions and traveled, and we got set up like hotels and food and everything. And then we got to stay with the national team for 2 weeks. And, that was because I knew Italian, and because, you make those connections.
Open up doors. There we go.
Yeah.
How cool. And so obviously you're a fighter. We've been hearing about all your cool fights in and out of the ring and so on. But do you write or read or engage in other like creative, non-fighting things? Because this is writers and fighters. So I like to invert that question for people.
Yeah.
So do you read creative stuff?
Yeah, it was funny actually, because I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was like talking about like pursuing my art, and I get really passionate sometimes when I get into my talking about the things that I care about, because I'm a very ambitious person, but my ambition is born out of my passion, I think. But I feel like my life is about expressing my own creativity. Like I get dressed in the morning, and I put on all these colorful clothes, and that's an expression of my creativity. Like when I cook my food, I cook all these different things because it's an expression of my creativity. And I feel like I just need to get it out there. Like my skateboarding is creativity, my handstands, everything is just like, well, what can you do and how can you put it together? And obviously there are like, I paint a lot, or recently I started painting. I used to draw more, but now I'm like really enjoying painting because I can use so much color when I paint. And I do a lot of digital illustrations, and I build, because I love skateboarding, I've been building like chairs out of skateboards. I don't know why, I just really love chairs. I think it's because it's a useful object.
Yeah, I saw one that online. I saw one of your recent ones online or something. It was the decks of the boards made into a chair, and I was like, that is so slick.
Yeah, I made a stool. I made a chair when I was in Sweden, and I've got a chair, like I've got the kind of what would you say, the framework for it to put together. I just need to get the seats parts cut out, because I got to decide like how I want the skateboards to fit and which colors to use, like which boards to use to put it on there. And I just like, I love, like I've always been a really creative person, and I have this need, I guess, to express it. And I'm really trying at the moment. I mean, sometimes I write as well. I've written songs also. I just want to do everything, because I feel like I want to have that experience. And I feel like the more things I do, the richer I will be. And the more things I can then do by combining all of those things. And, I studied graphic design, obviously, also when I first came to Australia. That's what I did.
And so the graphic design thing, I guess my question would be, the art and stuff was obviously an influence before drawing and whatnot, then going into like digital drawing and whatnot, and composing on the computer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been creative, like in drawing and painting since I was a kid, but I always felt like I wasn't that creative. I would draw something that I could see quite well, and I always really enjoyed drawing bodies. And then when I was in Italy, I was going to go back to Sweden to study, but I found a school that had a collaboration with another school in Australia, which was a graphic design school, and I was like, that sounds awesome. It seemed so much fun when you read about all the courses, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So then I ended up coming to Australia instead, and I was like, yeah, I can learn how to surf. I'd watch Point Break a lot. And I was like,
Good movie.
and so I came here, studied graphic design, and then was working with that. But I think that actually, I mean, I don't like, I like doing graphic design to a certain extent, but it also means that you're creative for other people. You're not expressing unnecessarily your own creativity because you're not in control at the end of the day, because it's not really for you.
Yeah, commissioned work, sure.
Yeah. But I think, so I worked as a graphic designer, but then obviously started boxing, and I was like, you know what, I want to box more than I want to be a graphic designer. But I've always wanted to be an artist, and I feel like studying graphic design really allowed me to become more creative, and to sort of, I think it opened up a door to that world that I hadn't really seen before. And ever since, like, it's really helped me grow my own creativity and the possibilities of my own creativity. And I think that's why I like to create using different mediums and different things, because, like, doing a chair, for example, I'm like, I don't know how to do a chair, and I feel like almost stressed about it, but I'm like, but I want to do this chair. And I also know that if you don't do it, then you're never going to be able to do it. Like, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And then you'll start to be able to experiment and express, like, copy things. If you don't know how to do it, don't worry about it. Just take, a design, build that, and then you'll be able to play around with that. Because that's, I guess, what I've done with all other creative endeavors. And I feel like I used to separate my physical activities from my creative activities. Because with physical activities, whenever I want to do something, I'll just be like, yep, I'll just go in, work hard, and I'll work it out along the way, but that's where I want to get to. And then I'm enjoying the journey. But I feel like with creative stuff, I sit there and I think, and I'm like, oh, what should I do? I'm like, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm like, ooh, or maybe, and then I just don't start. But I was like, you know what? I think the premise should be the same. You just start, go in, work at it. Maybe it'll be ugly, because when you're doing a painting, there's always that moment, or when you're creating anything, there's always a moment where you're like, this is going to turn out really freaking ugly. But then you keep working at it, and then you're like, wow, that turned out pretty cool. I didn't think that when it was so ugly. But, that's like, and that's like that moment in anything where you want to give up, where it's ugly, where it's going badly, where you get hurt and you're like, you could give up. And I think that that's the same for anything. But if you choose not to give up, you're going to get past that stage, and that's when it's going to be worth it.
I think that's, again, goes back to that brilliant thing you said, that dare to be bad at something. Like, well, I've never picked up a paintbrush. Well, maybe your first paintings are going to be kind of shitty and life will go on, because, again, it's like the first time you step into a ring, you're clumsy, your feet don't know what to do. And yeah, anytime something is new, that newness is important, that weird discomfort, and is it going to be okay? And sometimes they're not, right? And again, even in the art game, it's like, you don't win every one of those, right? But you still do it because the passion, right? You still do it because I have to express myself. And I like that you have that in you, that, like, I have this stuff I need to get out. And I love that. I love it.
Yeah, and I think, people have said this before, but, like, you've got to fall in love with the process and the journey, not the destination. I saw someone on Instagram put up, like, an artist, and he said that, the amount of times that I've been like, that's where I'm going, and then you don't get there, but you get somewhere else, like, along the journey. He's like, those are the times that, like, I've created some of my best stuff and I didn't even get to where I intended to. And he's like, well, what if you could fall in love with the journey instead? And I think it's just hard sometimes because, a lot of us are so focused on the goal. And I think you do need to have goals, because it sets you on a path, but you need to be flexible as to where that path then takes you. And for me, I think I love the journey. Like, I love, like, putting my head down and just, like, losing myself in, if it's a painting or an activity or something, because it's like that, when you learn something little, like that process of like getting better, even if it's so slowly, and then when you get it, even if it's taken forever, it's just so powerful.
Yeah, I think no, yeah, I think that you're smart to find these other outlets as well, rather than just leaning in entirely into one. I think we should play to our strengths, right? And you lean into those one or two things you're maybe talented or gifted at or put the work into, but then you got to have this other stuff around it, right?
Yeah.
And I definitely do think that your art does something for you, your personality, and you as a boxer.
Yeah.
The skateboarding thing. I saw you doing kick flips and stuff on Instagram, and I'm like, what's this? Is it kind of new? What turned you on to skateboarding? What's the skateboarding thing about?
So I actually bought my first board. It was in 2018. I wanted to get one earlier, but people wouldn't let me because my ACL and that. But I don't really remember why I wanted to start skating, but I've always really loved the like street art scene and like streetwear, and I love the graphics on skateboards, and there's something culturally about it. I think that's always appealed to me, but I just gotten it into my head. I was like, I'm going to start skating. So in 2018, I bought my first board, and it was a cruiser because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to skate, but I didn't think I thought I just wanted to cruise. But so I started skating to and from the gym in Spain, and I fell a lot. But I just loved it. There was something about it because I think there was like a fear to it because it's scary. Like the first time you stand on a board, you're likely to stand on it the wrong way and it's going to fly and you're going to land on your ass. Mm-hmm. And it hurts. Like the concrete and asphalt, like it's hard. But I just, as often with things that I do, I was like, I want to get good at this. So I was skating a lot, and I was like practicing every day in Spain. I was like practicing tic-tacs, which is just when you kind of lift your front trucks back and forth. And you can get to a point where you can actually generate speed from doing that. Mm-hmm. So you can start from a still. But then I wanted to learn how to ollie, and I was skating a lot. I met a friend who also kind of had cruisers, and we were skating together, but none of us really knew what we were doing. So we were mostly just like rolling around in the skate park up and down things. And I would bring it on trips and stuff. But obviously I was limited to how much I could skate then because I've always boxed and trained so much. And it's hard to skate when you're tired because then there's a risk of injury. And then I had an accident. I tore a ligament in my foot. And then, everyone was probably in boxing was hating me because I was, like, don't get injured. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Nothing's worth having without a bit of risk. But I think then when we were getting closer to the Olympics and we had world championships, I had to sort of I just couldn't really skate much. But I always loved it. And then when I went back to Sweden now during COVID, I didn't expect to be in Sweden for so long. A friend of mine lent me a board. And we didn't even know each other all that well. We met the last time I was home, and we'd been kind of like following each other on Instagram. And he had a board. He's like, yeah, I have this. And I went into the indoor skate park for a bit because it was still winter. But then as soon as the snow melted, I started skating to and from the skate park. And I just noticed how much better I was getting, or like just how much more comfortable on the board I was getting. But then I broke my leg, not skateboarding.
Oh no!
I was working at a climbing gym in Sweden, and I was practicing handsprings. So I broke my leg, but it was almost fun in a way now because I've learned so much about injuries, and I feel like it allows you again to be creative. It forces you to be creative with how you train. So I was like, okay, well, this sucks. This was really annoying, but I've still got another leg, and I was practicing my pull-ups, and then I was like, well, I'm working at this rock climbing gym, so I can go climbing. So I did that, but I was missing skating because the day before I broke my leg, I had this mad session where I was like, I dropped in on all the different places in the skate parks. So it was like they were pretty steep, and like one was really high, and I dropped in on all of them, and I was so proud of myself for that, and I just felt like I was on a roll. So as soon as I got my cast off, I thought I couldn't really stand on the board straight away because my foot wasn't actually as good as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was just going to walk out of there. But then as soon as I could, I started skating again. I was skating switch for a little bit, which is like the opposite stance because I couldn't kick with that foot that was broken. And since September, basically, I've skated nearly every day. I went on a skate trip because I had a ticket back to Australia, but it got cancelled. And then I ended up going on a skate trip to the south of Sweden with a girlfriend who is a really good skater, actually. So we skated every day. And then I came home and I had like access to the skate hall. And again, I would just skate almost every day for 2 to 3 hours. And I learned so much. I think basically everything that I've learned skateboarding has been since September. And I still feel like such a newbie, you know, with skateboarding, and I don't feel like I have any talent for it at all. But I think it's just, skateboarding is the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's so, that one is like almost like in its essence, it's one of those things where you get so many opportunities to give up. Like the first time you stand on the board, you could give up because it's scary. And then you're going to fall over and you're going to keep falling over and you're never going to stop falling over. And every single time you're going to get injured, every single time you could choose to give up. And I feel like there is this respect within skateboarding because you don't give up. Like for the people that still keep skating, it doesn't matter how good they are. But you know, if you've learned to drop in, you've learned your rock to fake it, you can ollie up onto something, or you can do an ollie. It's like everyone that skates knows what it takes, you know, the dedication it takes to get there. And I think that's what I love about it.
I agree. I like to, you know, I like watching skaters on YouTube and whatnot. And, you know, and it'll be like 15 times in a row, like biffing it every time he's trying to get down these 5 stairs. And then on number 16 or something, he nails it. And all his friends that are recording there, and they lose their shit. And I'm like, that is so cool. I did inline skating when I was a teenager, and like BMX stuff and things like that. One time, I'm going to tell you when I decided, I was like, the skating thing, maybe not. I was with some friends, and I shouldn't admit this on the air, but there were new houses being built in our hometown, and we stole a bunch of the supplies that they were using to build the houses with, and we made a little vert pipe in the back of one of my friend's yard. I'm talking like a 6-footer. Like we took a truckload of wood from there, and we make this 6-footer. And I'm like, I've seen guys drop in on this, and I've never done that shit. And I jumped down with my inline skates and totally bust my ass, right? And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So when you tell me that, like, I went to the skate park and I dropped in on all of them, I was like, I tried it once after thievery, after doing illegal things. I was like, I ain't doing that.
Well, I don't think I dropped in on a 6-foot one because I'm pretty scared when it comes to like the vert stuff. It's like, I'm scared of heights anyway.
It's so crazy.
But I want to build a mini ramp outside my house. So I'm going to get onto that.
I like that.
What I feel about skating is also, for me, it's like I have to skate every day, and now I haven't been skating every day, and it like makes me stressed because like I feel like, you know, I don't have an affinity for skating. Like it's so uncomfortable for me. Like my legs are stiff. Everything that I've learned, people, you know, I put things on Instagram and people think that like that I'm talented, at it. You know, like because yes, I've learned a lot like quickly, but then I've been in the skate park like for 2 to 3 hours every day. Sometimes I've been in there twice. So it's like, and I've stood there for hours practicing the same thing over and over and over. And I don't rest like really when I do it. And a lot of people don't see that. They think it comes easily, but you know, my talent is my drive. Like that is the talent that I come to the table with, that I will keep working at it. But none of the stuff that like I do comes easily to me, but you just don't show it, you know, like sometimes I'll put up a video of me like jumping up onto the same thing, failing over and over. Yeah. But you know, like Instagram is a highlight reel. You know, you put the good shit up on there. But I do have, you know, videos like sometimes I just set the camera up for, you know, however long I'm doing something. But everything, you know, if you want to get good at something, it doesn't matter. Like you can come to it with talent, but you're going to have to work hard at anything.
No, I'm a big believer that a lot of that, talent and certain gifts and stuff, I was like, that only gets you so far. I was like, nobody that's a badass at anything got there without the fucking hard work. Like, simple as that. Like, I don't buy that stuff. Because, again, when we see the Tony Hawks, when we see the LeBron James playing basketball, I don't watch LeBron playing basketball in practice for hours at a time, right? Like before, when I was messaging you today to plan for this, you were like, "Oh, I hope it's at this time because I'm at the skate park," right? And so we see the final product of you landing that trick, right? Or even in the writing world, which is what I do. Yeah, people say, "Oh, I saw that thing you got published. It was really cool." I was like, "Yeah, but you didn't see me behind the computer for months and crying and sweating and smoking and just like, where am I?" And you just saw the final product. You didn't see the work that goes into it. But therein lies that thing. It's like, well, that work isn't really for the world. It's for us, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, I guess some people, it's easier for some people to knuckle down and to just accept that hard work maybe. Or like for me, I feel like, like my talent is maybe that I have the ability to do that in a lot of things, because I can find this passion for a lot of things. And I feel like for some people, maybe they don't have, maybe passion doesn't come as easily to them or something, so they have to find the right thing in order to discover when it's worth it for them to put in all that effort. But for me, I think I've done it in so many things that I know that it's going to be worth the effort. And maybe it is that I am like, I hope that I'm in love with the process, like I get frustrated and I cry because I want to get the results as well. But I love the process also because, like I said earlier, that process is what makes, the goal or whatever you get at the end, the prize, like worth it, because the harder you have worked, the better it's going to feel when you do get it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Once you get those victories, it makes all that hard work, and it tastes good, man. It tastes good.
Yeah, that's it.
So, what are your next moves for the future? Whether that's boxing and your artwork or whatever, and then where can people find you?
Well, only just got back to Australia, so I'm trying to kind of get back into training now. I feel a little bit uncoordinated when it comes to the boxing because I haven't sparred anyone for a long time. But you were waiting to kind of see what happens with the Olympics. I'm just going to try to get back into it and see what happens with that. And then just kind of, I guess, settle back into life here. But I'm really trying to make a push now at the moment with my creative stuff. So I'm doing a lot of painting and just building and creating and trying to push it. And it's hard for me because I don't know about like marketing is not my thing. I just put myself out there, but to try to get people to buy things off you is a different matter.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's good. I wish you luck on that. That's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, but I'm really enjoying it. Like I love creating and like just taking going wherever my inspiration takes me. So I'm doing a lot of that. And online, it's on Instagram is, I guess, where I'm mainly active, which is at Pebbles Warhammer.
At Pebbles Warhammer. I'll put that link in the show notes and everywhere I post this.
Yeah, and also if anyone's interested in my art, I've got at Pebbles War Paint. At
Pebbles War Paint, and that's just your artwork then?
Yeah, exactly. But I usually post it on the other one as well. So if Pebbles Warhammer is a lot of whatever crazy stuff I do, a lot of colorful stuff, skateboarding, some boxing on occasion, but handstands, the occasional nudity.
Yeah, I saw one of those. Pretty neat.
Only for content. Otherwise, I won't do it. Just to provoke a little bit, just because I can.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. I dig it. So we'll direct people there. Why Pebbles? What's that? What's your nickname from?
It's actually from ages ago when I started boxing. I had really short hair and it was red, and I used to wear it up in like a little bow, like Pebbles. Yeah. And then I just thought it was really cool, like a fun nickname because people used to call me that at that time. And then Warhammers because someone else gave me that because my last name Stridsman means like man of battle in Swedish, so it's like warrior. And then I think Thor's hammer, so it's like became Warhammer. So it just kind of not many people call me that, but I just love the name, so it's just stuck.
I love how your last name, that your surname has the fighter thing built into it. That is just too good. That is too good. All right, girl. Hey, I enjoyed this. We'll get people over to look at your art and stuff. Maybe we'll get somebody to buy something. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care. right, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation I had with Anja Stridsman. Was just a super cool person to talk to. A cool person to follow, like on social media and online. You can check out her website, anjastridsman.com. On Instagram, she is Pebbles Warhammer, as she said during the interview. Again, a very vibrant personality, very colorful personality, like her wardrobe, which I love. And that also shows in her art, that colorful personality thing. And so let's support that. She has a store on the website on anjastridsman.com with her stuff for sale. I believe she's working on international shipping soon for those of us outside of Australia, where she is local. So keep up with her online to get plugged into all that kind of stuff, and you can keep up with her boxing training, her artwork, and her skateboarding practice. All right, y'all. Stick around for next week. I'll talk to you guys soon. Until then, be good, be safe, take care of each other.